There are many misunderstandings, but I'll address just a few of them today. One of the most common misconceptions out there is that many businesses think that they can only have a VAT liability in a particular country as long as they have a business entity established in that country. Now, this is not always the case. A business can have a VAT liability in another country purely because of their sales and purchases and the structure of their supply chain. Now, what I mean by VAT liability is that an e-commerce seller would have an obligation to register for VAT and file regular VAT returns in another country. In other words, sellers shouldn't automatically think that because they don't have a legal entity set up in another country, that this exempts them from collecting VAT. Another myth is that often sellers think that because they sell e-services and not physical products, that this makes them exempt from collecting VAT. Now again, this is not the case. When it comes to European VAT compliance, there are different rules for physical products and e-services, but e-services are not exempt. I'm talking about things like downloads for software, online learning services, or digital streaming services, music, games, films, and so on. And now, sellers of e-services to consumers in other countries must ensure they collect VAT at the relevant rate in the country in which the consumer is located, and they must start collecting the right amount of VAT from their very first sale. Now, physical products are different. E-commerce sales of physical products, they're subject to what we call distance selling thresholds. Now, what this means is that a B2C seller can charge VAT at their domestic VAT rate up to whatever the annual threshold is for the country in which the customers are located. Selling above the threshold means, however, that the seller must then register for VAT in the country where the customers are located. So the changes from domestic VAT under the threshold to VAT in the foreign consumer's country above the threshold. Now remember too that in many countries the threshold is as low as €35,000 for 1 year. In an ideal world, that would be the case. Unfortunately, sellers sometimes ignore the distance selling thresholds. They may decide to keep selling in another country regardless and claim that the authorities would have to catch them before they do anything. I have to say now, this is pretty risky, and it's risky because we hear stories all the time at Meridian of successful companies getting into cash flow difficulties because they've been audited by the Italian, Dutch, German or other EU authorities. What happens is that they then have to pay substantial amounts in penalties along with the original VAT that was never paid. So really there is no hiding room nowadays, as the authorities have very sophisticated techniques for getting information on cross-border selling. And it's also worthwhile keeping in mind that the authorities are helping each other out. We were recently at Meridian approached by a UK seller, and they had received a letter from HMRC telling them that they owed the German tax authority €100,000 and it was to be paid immediately. So the notion that a seller can ignore their VAT compliance responsibilities in another country, well, it just really isn't wise at all. Finally, we sometimes hear from sellers that they can file their own VAT returns. Now, in the EU, filing your own VAT returns is a huge challenge because all interactions with the authorities must be done in the local language. So if you need to register for VAT in Germany and file VAT returns to the German authorities, you can't really do it without having someone who speaks German and knows their way around the bureaucracy of the German tax system.